I see.
I'm letting the town's deadline to make. Sorry.
Are you getting it?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's no Wi-Fi. There's
Oh.
no ability to-
Yes, we're good with the
I think we're on, so.
Okay, I don't understand how we're
Wi-Fi. Yeah.
if they don't take it up.
Okay.
That's what this uses.
Right.
Yeah. But that system does not use Wi-Fi.
You still need a
It
motion.
uses a radio, dedicated radio.
Okay, the meeting of the Economic Development Advisory Board in a workshop setting is called to order. First item on the agenda is the economic development update from our staff. Steve.
Yeah, so at this point, I know everybody's kind of always want to understand what's going on with the northeast corner. And at this juncture, the best I can give you is they're very optimistic about all the tenants that they're looking at, and then they have a lot of contracts out that they're looking to sign. But because they're working directly, there's the site across the street, they don't really want to play poker with their cards on the table with the tenants. And so, a lot of it has to do, again, with this domino game of certain tenants will bring other tenants, and once something falls, the rest of them can fall together. So my goal is to bring them back to do a presentation, at least at the council meeting, in March. And one of the things we're working on is we're still working through some maintenance issues with it relates to the wash. So we'll probably be bringing those issues to the council as well, just so everybody understands what's those maintenance.
What are those issues?
It's just generally figuring out in the long term who will maintain the wash bottom, and what's the best interest. So when you start looking 20 years out, is it when you look at the wash bottom and how it interacts with the wash going underneath the road, which is our responsibility, does it make better sense to look at the potential that the town just at some point picks up the maintenance responsibility altogether for everything, for the best interest of the public. So those are the things that we're considering right now. And then the other issue was just kind of a flood insurance issue, where there's just no coverage available. They shop it around.
Is that in a flood zone? Obviously.
It's not in a flood zone. No, not like a FEMA flood zone. So, but those are the issues we'll bring back. I can't discuss them now because we didn't really agendize that specific item, but I'll just give an update as to where we're at. And then we are, looking at so the circulation plan that we're working on. We're still trying to figure out the next steps for when we're going to get the stakeholder group together and then bring something back to this group. And I know we're going to talk about that, and that's on the agenda for the EDAB to be discussing. And I know Peter's going to go through a calendar. One of the things that we're going to be talking about is parking. And as we start to look at parking through all of that, when we're discussing parking as part of the circulation plan, we were talking about the potential for on-street parking, which seems to be pulled back. So we're looking at alternatives to on-street parking that would look at potentially other solutions to solve some of the parking issues that we do have. And when we look at overall parking in the town center, it's not that we're missing parking. It's just that a lot of it's owned by private ownership, which we don't have access to. And so where we have a lot of shared parking situations or where we have a lot of restaurant growth, there are some parking disparities. So we're going to start looking at ways that we can, manage that. And that'll be part of the redevelopment plan process, because when you look at the redevelopment plan, it's specific to kind of like how we want to see these properties develop over time. And so some of those properties that we're looking at maybe for redevelopment might look at in terms of parking with future redevelopment. So those are the kinds of conversations I wanted to start bringing up, and let the public know that we're thinking of these things, and then let you guys know what's kind of some of the conversation that's moving forward.
Can you talk to us about the vacant lot behind Athens? What's going on there?
Yeah, that's part of the discussion. So I don't want to get into the details because it'll be an agenda-sized item at some point. But just to give you an update, that's where we're headed towards.
Okay.
And then, so we're, Peter and I are going to be working on, along with Sharon, economic update that we're going to the council. And I don't know if I'm stealing some of your thunder, but, so that'll be in March, and then what we'll do is come back, hopefully, to the Economic Development Advisory Board. It's just the way the timing works out, because we need to get that as part of the budget process and come back and have further discussion on that, as well as how some of the assumptions were put together, and looking at, from the economic development perspective, some of the metrics that we want to be able to year to year look in and look at what we can and can't do, but but we still want to have some level of measurement. So that's something that we're going to be looking at. But overall, when we start looking at the town center numbers, they're almost identical to where they were last year. The visitation numbers are actually up 1%, and so it's we're trying to get some of the revenue numbers, but they're looking fairly consistent from year to year. And anecdotally, I can tell you that some of the businesses are saying that they're struggling a little bit, that there's traffic, but people aren't buying. And maybe that it's accommodations in restaurant that's filling, that's filling the gap of the revenue that maybe is missing with some of the traditional retail. So just going to try to get a better feel on that and give you kind of some updates as to what's going on.
Can you give us some idea, maybe without naming names, about in the downtown center, what high sales tax revenue for us is and what's real low? And are we talking about some of these tenants generating $500 in tax revenue or $5,000? I mean, I have no idea what these numbers are.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And that's one of the things we're looking at. I don't have details on specific businesses of what they're bringing to the table. I don't know. I'd have to go back and talk with Lowe's. That's one of the conversations we need to have. You're usually pretty good.
I'm thinking about the town center.
And the town center side of it, I would say, obviously Bashas' is the biggest driver in town center. The hotel is a big driver in town center. We consider Savannah. But yeah, the local shops, we look at those collectively. That's how I look at it. So I look at it as an entity of itself in each individual shop. And as an entity, they're not make or break, but they're fairly significant, but they're the character of the town. So,
Losing Ace is going to be a sad thing.
What
Yeah.
is
Losing Ace.
it? Ace, yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm going to make an assumption, which is that at some point we're going to get some hard data. Because as we begin to look at what is the economic future of Fairfield, we have to have discussions that are a little more detailed than this generality, that says whatever it says. Yeah. And the only way, at least from my perspective, the only way you plan is with hard data.
I don't disagree. And,
so when is that going to be available?
When you say hard data, like revenue data?
Not just revenue data, I mean forecasts in terms of, what can we expect in terms of foot traffic to various types of retail establishments, just as an example.
Yeah, so that's what's going to be presented. So we did that last year with the forecast. We're improving upon that this year. And then that's what I want to come back in the next follow-up conversation is to kind of look at that data and information. And then let's just pick kind of the metrics that we want to have when we start looking at data points from year to year or however we want to manage those time periods for updates. And so that's the next step of this process.
And that's going to be sliced and diced by various types of retail?
Wait a bit. You got to understand the constraint that we're under, and that is that individual tax revenue from individual establishments is confidential information. Mm-hmm. We are a very small town, and what data can be even shared with the town is limited. Basically, if you're not looking at the number of establishments, whether you say retail or whatever, you can't get very much beyond that.
I'm not necessarily, in fact, I'm not talking about actual dollar figures. I'm talking about a Jiffy Lube is going to generate so much traffic in terms of customer versus.
The way that we're approaching that is that, and what we kind of did last year, is that we will look at probably, I'm in the process of doing it right now. We're probably going to do a revenue forecast. And the revenue forecast will probably be driven by the forecast that the state uses. but it's going to be more global than dissecting it. However, my friend here there are metrics within the economic development world or retail world, the development world, that you can approximate $350 per square foot retail sales at this kind of a shop, and we have those kind of shops. So at $350 for the year times X number of square feet times our 3% sales tax, we should be getting about this. And that's really what happened, I believe, when we were looking at Carefree Quarter.
Yeah.
That you got 90,000 square feet of retail that's going to be subject to tax at 300 or 450 or, you know, pick your number. I mean, that's also going to be in play. And then you apply a rate to it, and that'll get you some idea of that.
Yeah.
And we know how many rooms, I think we know how many rooms, and we know what roughly their per day rate is, and their occupancy. You make an assumption about their occupancy rate at 80, 90, whatever you want to do. And then you have the 3% plus another 3%. Is it 3 and 3, right?
Yeah.
So it's 6%. And so we'll go through that kind of process to get a look. I'll do a forecast based more on actual collections. He'll do one based on square footage and build out. And then it'll give us some clue, but you can't, it's just too small an area to understand. We don't even know for sure what we're going to lose with ACE. You know, we're kind of going, it might be about 80K a year. I don't know if that's true. But as much as I would like to have the data, it's just not available.
So what I do is I try to estimate it, and then when I do estimates, then I can make estimates on individual places, right? If I go back and I get actual data, and they're only going to give it to me in an aggregate, but even in an aggregate, let's say we're talking about accommodations, well, there's only 2, so it's pretty easy to kind of discern. Plus, you also on top of that would have the short-term rentals, which then actually now fall into that category. So those are the things that I'm trying to figure out, and I'm going to try to get to the best. But what I want to do is that when we come back together and discuss it, that we kind of agree that we've built the best mousetrap year in, year out to be able to see the year-over-year differences and changes, trying to use the same data points or at least the same methodology, and we all kind of agree to that.
And what we can't get is any kind of secondary effect. I mean, if ACE leaves, then some of Bosch's business will also go down for the person who went to get screws and wound up buying a sandwich. Right.
And that's coming, I think next month we're going to have that pretty well. At least start the discussion with it.
Yeah. So there'll be an agenda-sized item, and maybe we can move on to that agenda item because that will give us more latitude to talk about it.
Let me ask Peter a question since you're the economist. Businesses pay sales tax to the state. And so all of these different little stores here, they don't report to us, they send sales tax to the state. And the state uses some formula to give it back to us. And do we get like an aggregate amount? We don't get it divided up by.
We get a check.
We don't. Huh?
We get a check.
We get a check, but we don't get told that 30% of this was from the Indian place and 25% was from the Western store, and the other 15 was ACE. So we don't get that. We just get an amount.
I wanted to say not exactly.
Okay.
And I'll be able to tell you more about what that is and how far we can go with it when we talk about it next month. I'm working my way through that now.
But then that's to your point. The conversation's coming, and I totally understand what you're saying. I struggle with it all the time, and I know Peter struggled with it, and even some members of the council have struggled with the idea of not having perfect data. But we're going to try to get it to a place where we all agree that it's the data to use, right? It's the.
I mean, I don't think anybody's looking for perfect data.
Yeah.
I think people are looking for data that justifies the decisions that we make from a development perspective.
But there's another constraint, and that is we don't have any control over what landlords who they will lease out. Do we? We don't. I mean, other than we can't tell somebody that, we can't, for example, we can't tell the landlord who owns the A space that he's got to put in a certain kind of store in there. We can't do that. So we don't really have any control over that, do we?
We don't have control over it,
Yeah.
but what we do is we make our best effort to try to encourage it, and then the idea is that we have policies, and, you know, we get the property owners to agree that this is the way to, that's for everybody to have those. They're better tenants for them anyhow, right?
Right.
Or potentially are the better tenants, so.
There's some kind of control zoning wise. I mean, the way the zoning kind of is established in our ordinance. I mean, our commercial is pretty broad, but then there's office, and in other communities you have, you know, like a light industrial. There are things that we can say if somebody wanted to go in and have a small, you know, I don't know, soap manufacturing business solely. You know, we could say, well,
Just
we don't
for
allow that in towns. We don't allow that in our current zoning. So, you know, but if it's one type of restaurant over another, no. You know, if they sign a lease and they're a restaurant and that's an allowed use in that commercial zoning district, then yes, you have to take.
And office space like Caring Corps, wonderful organization, but
Well, our commercial does allow for office. So that's the thing with our commercial. That's something we'll talk about. I don't need to.
Yeah, that's another conversation.
It's another
Yeah.
conversation, but that'll be our zoning conversation.
I just want to let you know that we're working on that, and there's the update, and the conversation's going to be coming to you guys back in March, and so I'll try to get you as much information, and we'll get you as much information because we'll be doing the presentation the week before. We'll be able to give the whole presentation, and then we can kind of do a deep dive into, you know, kind of how we want to approach that moving forward.
Okay, can we move on to the redevelopment discussion?
Did you want to start with that one?
Well, that's the way that the agenda is.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well, you're the chair, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
No, I tried that once.
You're the boss.
I think that was in everybody's packet was a bunch of statutes, which was Article 3, which is the redevelopment statutes, and you want to talk about well, go for it.
Yeah, so this is really brief. You know, done a lot of updates on the redevelopment, especially as we went through the redevelopment process. But I think a lot of you weren't here when we actually went through the redevelopment plan process, and so the chairman asked me to just kind of put together some information on why a redevelopment area, what makes it different than a normal area, and a lot of it's just statutory. There's two parts to it. The laws give us more tools to be able to do things within a declared, defined redevelopment area. And so the town went through a process, and it was a pretty lengthy process of determining that we qualify for redevelopment area, and then it goes through the planning commission, and then you need a redevelopment plan is the other part of it. And so that plan then goes through the planning and zoning commission. And so what we did was we utilized the 2015 Village Center Master Plan, and we hired a consultant that came in that turned that plan and just added those elements to make it a redevelopment plan. The things that were required under the law, but we didn't change anything under the Village Center Master Plan of the to-do lists or anything like that. We just basically made it so it was legally a redevelopment plan. And what that does now is, because when you look in the Village Center Master Plan, it was calling for all kinds of things that you can only do in a redevelopment area, which is the facade program, where you can use public funds for private properties, where we can buy and sell property outside of what the state law requires. So the state law requires that everything over $1 million has to go to auction, and it goes to the highest bidder, and they can do whatever they want as long as the zoning says whatever. So you're trying to manipulate it through zoning, and it just becomes a pain. Whereas under the redevelopment law, you can actually just buy it and then put it on the market and sell it, and you just sell it through an RFP process. So it's a competitive bid process, and through that process, what they can do is that you can take the best project that fits in with the goals of the redevelopment plan. And so that's the fundamental difference between those two. And then the other one, really, you know, everybody likes to talk about eminent domain and condemnation. You can utilize it, and what it does is it establishes redevelopment as a public purpose. You know, so those are the
There's just two current examples of that. One is the city of Phoenix is going through this right now. They bought the old First Interstate building and have moved, or in the process of moving the police department into that high-rise, 40-story, whatever it is. That will leave their old headquarters on 7th Avenue in Washington, or Jefferson, one of the two, one place down there, the northern one, is in Washington. That leaves that site with no purpose for the city. So, and it happens that over time, they have acquired all four corners of that area, and they're hoping to eventually push the light rail out to the Capitol. So now at 7th Avenue, what they're in the process, and he's gonna see if he can get a copy of the RFP, they're getting ready to issue an RFP to go out to developers and say, what would you do with this intersection? How would you redevelop it to move forward? That's analogous to what we're talking about doing with Town Hall, because Town Hall is in the primo location for redevelopment. And maybe we can get a deal where they buy a building, they build us a building, they do something, but we get a primo restaurant location. I don't know how it's all gonna, and that's coming to us later in the year. But we can only do that and leverage that through redevelopment.
And when you look at the value back in the render, when you evaluate these projects versus just it being a straight real estate transaction, you can look at the value the project brings. So let's say, we do a swap and something like that, and maybe the real estate isn't necessarily even to even. Maybe the developer gets an advantage in the real estate transaction. But at the end of the day, when we look at the overall economics of it, we can say, hey, over a 10-year or a 15 or however we want to evaluate it, we can bring that back to a net present value and go, well, based on the revenue that this project's going to generate, based on the type of use and user and everything else, we're going to come out even or ahead, right? So that's the goal, is to generate that. So for us, a lot of what we're trying to do is generate that revenue, and it's recurring revenue. That's what our town's about. I mean, you make sure you got money turning the cash register so we can pay for the things that the community needs and wants.
So I would encourage you to read the statutes, at least glance at them, but spend some time looking at the redevelopment plan. And the link to that is in item.
Yeah, so the link was in there, and you can just find it on there.
Item 3 that we're going to talk about, the strategic work plan.
Yeah, and then just so you know, so the second component to the redevelopment is the redevelopment plan. And I would say that the Planning and Zoning Commission is uniquely responsible for the planning process as it relates to the redevelopment plan. And so what I will be doing is just to make sure that we have transparency in everything we do when we walk through processes is if we have things that are related to the redevelopment plan, they're going to go through you guys. And so like even the facade program, which is kind of great, it is a to-do list item that's in part of what's called the implementation matrix that's inside the redevelopment plan. So when you look at what we do as workers and staff, our goal is to do what is community approved and what leadership has approved, like these types of plans. And so in there is this matrix. And so that's the things that we try to bring forward on, in a way. So when you see stuff coming from us that are like the facade program, the more we can get it into documentation, whether it's the strategic work plan for the town, meaning that they're putting that as a priority, but it was already something that was decided this community wanted to do back in 2015, and then as we went through the redevelopment plan process. So these are things that we're bringing forward now that have already been vetted to get to this point, but we were going to continue to make sure that we're doing it right and we implement it in the way that was meant to be implemented, and then finding ways to make sure we monitor the success. So, and then what I'll do is then periodically I need to be updating you guys on the advancements and success of the redevelopment area. So we'll just do an annual report on that, and then or if we need to do an annual report, but maybe like a quarterly or semi-annual kind of update, whatever you guys want to do, we'll do that. And then there's a 10-year limit to the plan itself. So, 2032, it has to be redone. You keep the same plan. It just has to be
updated.
You need But the thing is, if there's updates that you want or things that you see, or, you know, there's always open to that conversation. We can always make tweaks to the plan to make it more relevant. So that's why when we go through the circulation of parking, that is fundamentally going to probably change the redevelopment plan. So there are things that'll come out of that plan, and I almost see it becoming like a companion to the redevelopment plan itself.
Yeah, we'll have flying cars by then, so.
Yeah.
Well, for example, I think the existing redevelopment plan shows that the vacant lot behind Athens, which fronts on Cape Creek Road, is proposed, the proposal is for a building.
Right.
And I understand that there's discussion about, at least for the time being, making that a parking lot so that it would increase people's ability to get right into town center. Because you wouldn't have to sort of walk all around, it's right there. And if you get out of your car and you're facing, when you get out of your car and come out of the parking lot, you're facing the sundial, and Athens is right there, and you are right on the circle. So that's a big change from what the original proposal is.
Correct.
Is that correct? So how do we,
Not necessarily.
well, a building versus a parking
Well,
lot?
it doesn't say when the building.
Of course, but, okay, but
So
So
parking.
is this some, how do we get this discussion started that maybe we need to change the plan? Or as Peter says, maybe we don't need to change it?
And that's something for discussion, right? And I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, a lot of cases when you see redevelopment plans, you'll have transitional uses. And parking is like a holding place, right? You'll see, like the city of Phoenix utilize parking spaces and they have parking lots. And then as things built, they built and they have their own parking. And so those are the things that we need to probably discuss this as we move forward. But yeah, there's something that we're looking at and considering all options to be able to deal with parking, and it's a great spot.
But is this something that you bring to us as the EDAB?
Yes,
Or is this something that we generate on our own?
I'll be bringing it to you.
Okay.
And it may be, so depending on what we're doing, so the Economic Development Advisory Board doesn't make any decisions. The Planning and Zoning Commission can make a recommendation. So in that case, it would be brought forth to the Planning and Zoning Commission, for the Planning and Zoning Commission then to make a recommendation to change something, and then if it has to go to council to get approval. So we just need to
Can I ask
determine.
a question? Would this be part of the circulation plan then?
It could be.
I mean, if that's a parking, that covers parking, and we would obviously, as John pointed out, we need data
Yeah.
to say we should or should not buy land for parking. We would need that data.
Yeah, because I mean, just in general, parking is not the highest and best use of any land. It's probably the lowest and worst use of the land. And so, I mean, that's something we just ought to have in the back of our heads as we
It's a necessary
think
evil.
about this. Well, yeah, it's a necessary evil, but how you react to that evil is where the planning comes in.
Yep, and that's why we're gonna
Yeah,
have
I
a
mean,
conversation.
it's good to know these things. It's good to have this information as part of the foundation of making decisions.
And the thing is that there are private property owners that are keenly interested in trying to find ways to solve some parking issues. And so there might be participation potentially we can get from our property owners. And so
Absolutely.
those are things we're looking at.
Yeah.
That's it for redevelopment, unless you have any questions.
Can we move on to the strategic park plan?
Is that the next on the agenda?
That's next on the agenda. And item number 3.
I'll let you take that.
No, go ahead. Your show.
That's my show.
Well, let me introduce it. Some of these items have been, as you heard, the town center master plan 2015. The circulation plan, I think, was started in 2020. When was it?
Yeah, something like that.
2020.
Started with the sign plan.
Yeah, it evolved from out of the sign
We
plan.
got the sign plan, circulation plan, we got all these things, and I have, together with others, have been pestering to get something down on paper as a work plan as to how we're gonna knock these things off. Then the town council came along and adopted a strategic work plan for the town, which assigned a bunch of items to us for either legacy items or economic development items or some P and Z. Us, when I say us, I'm talking ecumenical with all of the boards and all of the staff that are here. And so what this plan is trying to do is put it down on paper, give us a working, well, first of all, tell you what the source documents are. Tell us what the town assigned to our purview, the council did. Tell us what the source documents are for a lot of these things. They're all electronically linked so that you can knock them down, get an appreciation of them. Summarize all these things with a high-level work plan, just so that we know what we think, we know what we're talking about, and then ultimately put it onto a calendar, which is what is most important to me. And so you'll see where, what I would like to see is get some sense of what we're doing between now and December. It's pretty simple. First, we're talking about this plan, like on this meeting, this plan, talk about the building center redevelopment plan in the statute, which we've already talked about. And then I want to get an update from our discussions that we had before in the facade program. Next month, we'll be talking about the economic forecast, but we also, there's a little working group on this, and we're also talking about what are some of the economic metrics that we should be monitoring. For example, how many people do we have here in the summertime, and how many people do we have here in the wintertime? Right. So creatively, whether we get the data or not, we don't know. But we've tasked my man here to go to the post office and say, how many mail forwardings do you have on day X, Y, Z, and Q? So maybe we can see a pattern of what our residents are looking like. We're also talking about contacting the water company to see in terms of the variance of the bills. Problem is that the summertime, everybody's irrigation goes up anyway, so water usage in and of itself is not dispositive of that. But we'd like to get that heat track, drive-by, cell phone data, blah, blah, blah. We have all kinds of other minor data sources that aren't going to be dispositive. They're not what the Fed uses, but they might be indicators that we can use to tell us kind of just what's going on in the town. We'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about, next month, we'll also talk about our commercial build-out plan. You saw before where we had all those individual buildings and their square footage and what their uses are and whether they're part of the redevelopment plan is part of it. Yeah. And you can expand that and say, and if we set a metric, well, we want 80% of our square footage to be retail, or 75%, whatever it is. Let's track that, say, quarterly. And that's what we're talking about on the plan here, EO1, just in terms of what's going on with our properties here. What's vacant, what's moving, what's active, what's not active. We're also talking about maybe tracking building permits and the declared value of what the building permits are. And that doesn't, you know as well as I do, that the lead time on those permits could be forever, but at least it'll give you some kind of idea on that. So that would be, for example, next month. The month after that would be talking about circulation parking plan. And what we're conceiving now is to do that together with town council and have a workshop kind of a thing. So, you know, we've been talking about this forever. I mean, you know better than I. The ins and outs, I've been briefed on it once or twice.
We've had two stakeholder groups, so.
What?
Kind of had an evolved stakeholder group, and so it just kept going a little bit.
Right, so that's, but let's find out what's going on with that. What are we gonna do about it? How does that translate into what are we gonna do? When we did the walk, remember when we did the walk? And one of the things that stuck with me was we have a whole lot of breaks in our sidewalks.
Oh, yeah.
And we talked to the circulation consultant, I recall, And she was going to try to give us an idea of what's in town property, what's on private property, where the sidewalk breaks, where they're not breaks, what do we need, you know. We may only add 5 or 10, let's get a plan. We may add 5 feet of sidewalk this year and 35 next year and then go 2 years before we do, but a plan. Let's have a plan for that. So that's circulation and parking. And then that's where the discussion could come up about those parking sites over there. And then if you do get those parking sites, what do we really have to do? Maybe we have to juice our facade improvement program because now we're looking at the backs of all those buildings. It's going to be front facing. Don't know. Gotta talk about it. Hopefully at that time we'll also we're looking at the plan on the facade program is he's going to update it after this. Then he has a document that he's going to run around and talk to people. And then he's going to come back in April and talk to us about this is what it looks like. Would you recommend this to council? Remember, this is an FY26, which starts in July. So we could get this to the council before the 1st of July, so that hopefully we can get that taking on. Town hall relocation, I think that's going to take forever, personally. Where are you going to go? Are you going to try to stay there? Are any of these buildings appropriate? What is everybody's opinion going to be? We're going to have to have a workshop in terms of, I don't know, well, there's appraisals that are out and maybe back. There's going to have to be a needs assessment. What do you really need for town hall? Do you really want to build something here? Right. If you talk about building something here, what's the ownership of this dirt? What does that mean? And so once we just vet the problems, hopefully in a structured sort of way, and we can get him to do what he's supposed to do, then we will. Then we will take the town hall redevelopment on the road. There was a big issue when the water tank was going on that we were going to condemn more of the common area of the boulders and put town hall in.
Oh my goodness.
I don't think that's going to happen. But so we'll run, or he'll run. We'll do our own workshop, and then we'll take that on the road, and maybe we'll have more structure around it to share with people to let them provide input to us, and then it'll go back into the denizens of the deep out there, and draft an RFP or something like that, and bring that back to us to take a look at. And this, my guess is this is going to have to go back and forth 5 or 6 times.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just going to be, but maybe not.
Well,
If we have a mission and we're focused.
I just, quick question, just to clarify. Any of this process or any of this decision-making, does it have to go to a ballot?
None of this.
None of what we're talking about
Okay.
is going to the ballot.
This is all within, and that's why the understanding redevelopment is a huge part of the town hall function, that part, and even the facade improvement program is a huge part of that. And maybe the circulation plan will are all kind of structures built upon the redevelopment, and a strong sense of that would help.
One of the things I just want to interject, if it's okay, is, I'm working with a couple of commissioners to look at how we're doing the build-out plan, which would be part of the economic forecast. But any commissioners, working at, kind of 1, 2 commissioners who are, I want to get to 3 because then you get starting close, but where we can start tackling some of these things, and that's something of interest to you, if parking's an interest, then we can get together and maybe on a periodic basis talk through the parking issues that we're dealing with, and then kind of talk about things I'm working on, and get, just have that time. That way, look, we're small. I'm a small department. I'm department of 1, and this is a lot of stuff. And and it's easy to get sidetracked, which is why I like having the calendar, and I like seeing what's in front. I mean, obviously this is, it's not etched in stone, but it's stuff that we're going to do. And I just want to make sure that, and I say it's etched in stone as far as the dates go, some things may move here and around, but we're going to do them this year. And the quicker we can get to them is just making sure you guys want to be part of the resource solution. you know, absolutely, you know, for something to do, yeah, you're more than welcome. And that's why I think we're coming to a great product on what we're working with here with the update and the build up on it, so.
And then one of the things that's also going to take a long time, and I don't think there is a clear idea of the sequencing, but the code enforcement issue. And that varies on a lot of fronts. One is that we want to,
Commercial code.
we want to maximize our retail, because that's what keeps the boat afloat. And our zoning code does currently provide that some uses can only occur if they receive a special or a conditional use permit. And there are people operating those kinds of activities that don't have that kind of a permit. Or they're engaged in some activity that's not covered by the code, or it's not permissible under the code. But some of it, maybe you want to amend the code and preserve it, and that goes with some of our other issues, with the whole, I'm not sure how all this is gonna work, but there are fire and safety issues, there are town code issues, there are zoning issues, there's enforcement issues, there's blah, 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 and I can't even outline them for you right now. I mean, I don't know, and we've had discussions, and they're all very interesting discussions, more interesting than Robert's Rules of Order.
I don't know, that was pretty interesting.
I just keep saying,
Your
give
take
me a
on
badge
it.
and a gun and I'll take care of everything, but they won't do that, so.
So we're gonna have a workshop, and we're gonna,
Yeah.
and we have a new code enforcement officer that is a former peace officer, so that may be a advantage in doing this. But we have to pull all these strings together, and so this calendar throws it out till May. That'll give staff and the town some time to talk about what they think, and hopefully get something structured so that we can have a discussion of who, what, where, when, now, and all of those kinds of things. Because again, we have to try to, in my view, maximize what we got, because we ain't gonna get any more. You know, once we do the northeast corner, that's largely, we still have the northwest corner, but that's largely the end of the road. So we have to be pretty good about making sure that we're doing it. And then, once we start some of these things, we're gonna have updates throughout the process, and then, of course, we're gonna have the regular zoning and Board of Adjustment and all of that sort of stuff.
Do you foresee that at some point we might have a public meeting where we name names in code enforcement? Because I hear that there are a number of people who aren't complying, but I never hear any names and never hear.
Well, I suspect that they know who they are, but let us get our ducks in the order before we start defaming, or if people think that I don't know. It's just, let's not bring it up, Mr. Attorney, until we got some background, you know, that we know.
I don't know any names and I can't say anything. But I think at some point, when we're talking about enforcing code, we need to know.
Frankly, I don't know enough about the topic to know that it is a violation.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, the only reason why I know some things like storage or warehousing is a use permit is that we had the little blow up on the corner of State
Bloody
Basin and Tranquil Trail and Cave Creek. And that's a commercial activity, but it requires a special permit of some sort, right?
Yep.
So, anyway,
So by the time we get to the point where there's names, it's because we've vetted it out, and there's a list, and it's going to be even-handed. You know, everything is just the way it is, right? And so it's just notifying if we ever get to that point. I mean, I don't like doing that.
I'm not saying it should be in a public meeting. I'm just curious myself.
Eventually will
maybe that's
probably
information that I, as a commissioner, need to know.
Right, but it might be information that we'll be managing as far as, like, you know, when they go through who's out of compliance and how it's being dealt with, and there's processes that'll go along, and we'll have to document what those processes are, so what's an investigation, or, you know, a letter that needs to be written, or whatever it is, so.
Sometimes it's hard to name who right at the moment, because, I mean, really,
No,
I
I'm
think
not
our,
suggesting now, I'm just saying at some point, I hope this information gets
no,
circulated.
it's not
Here.
about not being transparent, it's more about how the process works. And I
Right.
think from where I sit, I think we want people to come into compliance as best as we can get them to come into compliance. It's not about, I don't like that business, look what they're doing, get them out, you know, it's making sure that people, you know, live by the rules that we have in place. And so that's why you won't hear sometimes so much about, I mean, we're working on, you know, we can only work on
If
so
we can
many
do
at
it
a
quietly
time.
and gently, that's fine.
I would say about 70% of the comments, people, when I just speak to people or talk to people or people complain about something, it is code enforcement issues related to the shops and space and all that other stuff. You know, the way things look.
But we have to make sure we know what we're doing
Yeah.
before we do it.
Of course.
Pull the trigger.
So that's the work plan. If anybody has suggestions, they want to move things, they move it up, down, sideways, backwards, forwards, it's easy. I mean, you know, just
It's just to give you guys an opportunity to understand how your time's going to be spent over the next
where we're going.
And
It's something that we can yell at them and say,
there is, yeah, that's not what we agreed to. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, it is part of that, is to make sure that we're you know, we make promises of things that we're going to do, and we just gotta get them done.
Yeah.
I like what you just said. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, we need a roadmap. As opposed to tackling
Sorry.
these things. on a
This might
haphazard
take
individual
a
basis.
year and a half or 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I worked for a majority leader who was the third ID, it landed in North Africa, and he said, we trained for 9 months to land on this beach. We landed on the beach that was 21 miles away, but we had a plan.
Before you leave,
A plan beats no plan, 9 times out of
did you have any comments before you left, or?
No, just thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you.
Last item, facade.
Yeah.
Town code facade program. You want to tell us what you changed?
Yeah, so I tried to outline it as best I could, and then when you look in there, I tried to highlight some things yellow that were kind of the important things. In one of the, you know, so what I did was, you know, we have the program guidelines. We were looking at, I applied for a $50,000 budget. That's what I put in my budget request. We're not the kind of place where you put 100,000 in and hope you get.
That's what I
50.
said.
Yeah, we're not
Well, I
Phoenix.
know-
Like if I was
But
competing,
that was my comment, you could always go down.
yeah, if I was competing against like other like, you know, departments across and widespread, but
Yeah.
you know, I just figured, dude, this is what they said. This is what we're doing. He's like, okay, let's go with that. So that's, and then we're looking at $15,000 as cap or 30%, whichever is less.
Okay.
And then what I did, I know, so just rushing through, I did add a commissioner as well as, to be named by you guys, as well as the mayor to the review committee. That's one thing that was brought up. And then it's only building owners, so I narrowed it down to just say it's just going to be building owners. And that includes building owners that own a multi-tenant building, or building owners that own, they own their own building, or they just have a single tenant. So, but some of them are owner operators, but it's going to be the owner that actually signs it.
So point of clarification on that, since you're on it. So let's say I'm the owner of the building, but I've got three tenants.
Mhm.
Can I apply for 3?
Well, you're going to apply for the building, so.
I think that it's not clear.
It's not clear.
It's not
Let's say you have
clear.
two
It should
buildings, one here, one
specifically
here.
say that the eligible properties are the 8 building owned by an owner.
Right. So let's say, and we can call it, I mean, and that's the question I was gonna bring up is, you know, we start looking at, you know, so we only have one place where,
Say
two
one-
places where, I guess you'd say Wilton Warren, I always consider it one building, even though it's two
Yeah.
separate little buildings there, but I would consider that one property,
Yeah,
right?
Warren.
And, you know, like let's look at, Mariachi Plaza,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's multiple buildings there. So we can do it by site, or we can do it by building. I would consider that a site, like a building. I would look at Mariachi Plaza as one. They can come in and just say, I want to focus on, I'm redoing this building here.
Mhm.
But traditionally, when you look at these types of projects, that's how they will look at the site. So
So that means if I've got 6 tenants in there hypothetically, I can only apply for one grant. Is that what you're saying?
One storefront, is that what you're saying? Or-
Well, it's the building, right? So a building owner's gonna be, so we're looking at the holistic building versus a tenant coming in and just
Right.
doing a tenant space.
So let's use Mariachi Plaza. So there's 3 buildings and multiple tenants in each building. You're saying that you're saying what?
That's what we can discuss. So if, let's say the owner of Mariachi Plaza comes in and says, I want to look to re-landscape the entire project, and it's gonna be benefited.
First of all, is there one owner of that?
Correct,
Yeah.
So he owns all 3 buildings?
yes. It's all, yeah. And so, yeah, so we'll look at it as a single project.
So he can't come in and say, I'm gonna do facade improvement on all 3 buildings, so I want to be able to file 3 proposals. He
Right.
cannot do that.
No, it would be a one proposal.
Is that all one block, Mariachi?
Yeah.
Or is it, it's one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I would see this as one.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you guys want different, but I would say that was one site, right? But he may come in and say, I just want to do bricks in the meat market, that building. And I'm focusing on that right now. I want to apply for the grant. And
Yeah, but I think one of the things we talked about at the last meeting was that in using that as a particular
yeah,
case example, that you could lose synergy. You know, he decides to paint the middle building purple, and the others stay the way they are. I mean, that doesn't look good.
you-
Doesn't give a good look.
and then you just say, we're not going to fund that project, right?
Well, I was using an extreme
Yeah,
example.
But I'm just saying, when we get to those situations and it's going up against other projects, and you don't have to fund a project just because you got the money. So that's part of the program. I mean, if there's no projects that are worth funding, then the committee says, we're just not going to fund that.
Well, let me turn it around. I
Yeah.
mean,
Are we saying that though because Mariachi has one owner? Are there other sites that are similarly situated but have multiple owners?
That's a good point. If there are 4 buildings in Mariachi and there were 4 separate owners,
Then there'd be 4 separate
there
projects.
would be 4 separate projects. But because it's owned by one person, it's not one project.
Mhm.
I don't know that that makes any sense.
It doesn't.
It does seem like a penalization, actually.
Yeah, it feels
Penalizes somebody for having a large.
Right, especially if he has a huge corner that would,
Yeah, I mean, you can do however you want.
Mariachi needs
I
more
kind of
than
see my
anything
building really,
is some uniformity. because
absolutely.
I go there 5 times a week to get coffee at bars.
Huh?
So,
And I look at that damn place and part of it has got a roof and part of it's got a roof.
That's right.
It's about the
It
ugliness.
really
of the
entice
building.
the owner to say,
It's-
well, let me just do it all.
Yeah,
because the whole
yeah,
idea is to
exactly.
improve the appearance.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so each building is going to be to the same constraints though. So it'd be almost exactly the same.
Well, 15,000 isn't gonna go very far.
Exactly.
I mean, the bigger issue would be that we're prohibiting under this, as I recall, that you can't do it every year.
Every other year's,
Every other year, but if he has 3 buildings and say, okay, I'm gonna do blue, I'm gonna paint it blue, okay, and it really looks good. But the first building gets blue, now he has to wait 2 years to get the next
Right.
building to go blue, and 2 more years to get the third building.
It kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, and I mean, what you're doing saves money, but I just feel like it penalizes the owner because
Yes.
he has more buildings.
Yeah, but at the same time, that one job could eat up
wipe out the entire program.
the whole.
It will be 45 grand.
And there's nothing to keep him from using his own money to.
Well, he
take care of
will, I'm
whatever
sure he's
he
probably gonna
wants
match it or
somebody else.
something. We're talking as if we know the guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an
Well,
incentive
he
to get
will.
some stuff, it's just a little carrot to get people to do something.
The next step in this is for you to go peddle this to the building.
I'll talk to the property owners.
Yeah.
And I think that, I think this is not an unreasonable plan to start with.
Uh-uh,
It's
not at all.
No,
So
I
go
just-
peddle it and see what comes back.
Yeah, I just think there needs to be some, depending on what you find out, there needs to
Uh-huh.
be some clarifying language in here that
Right.
relieves the confusion. that
Yeah,
is
I
around the
agree.
table.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
I'll just let you know, I asked Lars about whether the owner put in all of his sunshades.
Yeah.
Which are quite nice around Lars's car. He said, no, he had to pay for them himself, the owner would not do it. So that's something for you to.
So much for Mitch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He said,
right?
and he said, I will.
Okay, we know the answer.
Right, and then those are the issues you run into when you run these kinds of programs, is you're gonna have just different owners who have different approaches. So the other development that's like that would be, Spanish Village, where you have a couple buildings there, we have 3 of them, right? And But they're a little bit, they look at it more as a single,
Yeah.
and they will spend, though Don did pay for the Sun sales that went up, because that was unique to his business, so.
I think the other thing is maybe we make a decision that says we will only fund X number of projects this first year. Maybe it's only a couple.
Yeah.
Because if it's a couple, what's what I'm looking for? It makes more of an impact
Right.
than trying to spread it across half a dozen or so.
Right.
Well, that was the other question I was gonna ask is, do we want to open this up to the entire redevelopment area, or do we want to see if there's a more specific geographic area that's defined as far as our retail days along Easy Street and the intersection of Carefree Highway, or Cape Creek Road and Tom Bellington?
Yeah, because I kind of regard this as a pilot project.
Yeah.
See how it goes.
Well, and that's why it's only got 50K associated to it, because that's gonna limit it right there.
And so maybe we limit it to a couple of applicants.
Yeah.
Or,
Well, then it'll just fall out that way.
or if we only have two applicants and one of them is the owner of Mariachi and he needs 40,000 from us and our cap is 50. And
He does all three.
The other one's only got 10,000. We could spend our 50,000 by giving him a lot more than,
Yeah.
and get that project done, whereas limiting him to 15. So maybe we should build in some
I
flexibility.
think we're gonna go down and start painting.
Yeah.
Make it an Eagle Scout project.
There you go. There you go. Free labor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, but I appreciate all the comments that everybody provided, because, I think, and so what it allowed me to do is I started looking at how we would manage this and the documentation. And what I did was, instead of it trying to be separate documents, I tried to create a single document that has 4 sections to it. And those sections are what the program is, and all the terms and guidelines and everything else. And then it goes into the application where they give us the initial scope where we can evaluate that. Then it's going to go to an acceptance. As part of that is acceptance, there's going to be a final scope of work that gets as part of the approved. And then there's a reimbursement component to all that. So when they come back, they have to provide all the documentation. They did exactly what they said they were going to do. And here's the checks. I paid my guys, and everything's been done. Here's your reimbursement check. So, but that way, when we go to the file, everything's together. You can't say that you didn't read this because you read it, and it's attached to your acceptance. So,
So that's the process, but regarding intent, based on the discussion that we had here.
yeah.
What are you thinking of doing in terms of changing this?
As far as,
For example, limiting the number of applicants to.
well, let me get through what the property owner said, and then I can get you better information then, because we're going to take another bite at this when that call comes back, and then we'll finalize this conversation.
So if we're willing to give 15,000 maximum, that we're talking three applicants, because that's $45,000.
Yeah.
We got the other 5. So if we have a situation where we only have one applicant, like Mariachi, and he says, I need 40,000 from you guys, then I think we ought to be able to
Roll the other 10.
roll that in.
Do
Yeah.
something else. Or roll it into him.
So there's got to be some formula based on the number of applicants, if the applicant number's too low.
Yeah.
As long as we don't overspend our 50, I think we ought to spend 50 for one applicant. And if there are 5 applicants, then we divide, or 3 applicants, then we leave it.
No, there could be 5 applicants and we only award 2.
Yeah.
Or 3.
Yeah.
Or
Because
just
they're only
mariachi.
They're only merit, but all of the applicants may not be meritorious.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a beauty contest, and
Yeah, it
pick
is.
the ones that you like the best.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. So
I
and so
can't
there's-
wait for the swimsuit competition.
So there is a lot of flexibility. That's why you build
It is.
flexibility into the review process, but you talk about the guidelines and what you're trying to accomplish. And they have to explain it, right? So we put a narrative in here, the narrative of the project, and then the narrative of how you meet the goals of the program, right? So you tell me that you're creating retail, you tell me that you're doing whatever it is you're doing, and then we can evaluate that on that. But you don't even have to do all 30%. You can say, hey, you know what, the way the funding works out, what if we gave you 25%, but it allows us to do this project?
Yeah.
Not says you have to do all of it, right? And so
Yeah.
it gives you some flexibility to start talking to the applicants, depending on how many you get, and then kind of go from there. And,
What's the level of interest so far?
Yeah, has this been?
I think the level of interest you know, and I hate to say this, but, you know, like, I think Joe would have used the program for her building. You know, so, but we don't have a program yet, but I think there's interest from other property owners who have said that, you know, I know I've talked to, Spanish Village, and they would use it. I think the Chevron would use the program. So,
Well, that's one other thing about the law of unintended consequences, right? If you go out there and you pitch this, you may have 20 owners say, hey,
That's fine, but
Go line at your door.
then some may take the reality and say, oh, it'll be 10 years before they get to me, so I'm gonna spend the money anyway.
I'm just gonna do it anyhow, right? But at least you're talking to the owners, right? You get a conversation started, so that's kind of where we're at right now, and so I'll reach out to them, and if you guys do have any additional comments, I need to take a look through it, just send them to, because this will be another general comment period, and anybody from the general, you know, all of our adoring fans in the audience have any comments on the program, they can send them our way.
well, you could,
Yeah. So, did I get your scope of work? You get a chance, take a look. I did try to enhance
I
it.
look at it when
Yeah.
we're sitting up there, yeah.
Because they're small projects. It's not like a development project, you know? Yeah.
You know, as long as there's a process for measuring what they say they're gonna do, and make sure they're doing it. Well, anyway, I got it. You know,
Yeah.
I got it.
Anything else? Any other discussion?
Oh, the only other thing I wanted to clarify is that, you know, kind of non-starters, right? So let's say somebody's got a building and it does have a storage type use in there, and they're going to, and it's, how do we want to handle, do we want, if they're not in compliance with the codes,
They're
or
not
they have tenants,
eligible.
they're not eligible.
No,
Okay.
No, these,
It would be tenants or
Okay.
owners in good standing.
these have gotta be
Yeah.
people understanding.
Yeah,
just like a HOAs.
No code violators.
Yeah.
yeah, okay. I just want to clarify, make sure that, and I'll make sure it's in here. I think it is, but I'll just double check and before it goes out, so.
That says it right here.
Criteria for participation.
Right, it's kind of a carrot and stick put together of, hey, we'll give you some money, you make sure you're up to date and.
Yeah, we define that, the applicants are defined as the owner of a property. And then the second sentence would be that the applicants have to be in compliance
Yeah.
with all
Correct.
zoning and ordinances.
Anything else in your?
Yeah, so as part of what I'll do is, again, we'll do the community input, and then what I'll do is I'll take all that stuff, I'll redraft something, and then I'll have the attorneys take a look at it and see if because I just do it in general terms, but they'll probably want to have some specific legalese they want to put in, and we'll get that in there, and then we can evaluate the whole thing, so. Yeah. Attorneys got to eat too. So,
Attorneys?
yeah.
But it's less than
So, but again, we'll come back and then ultimately this will be a P&Z recommendation because I see it as part of the redevelopment planning process.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks good, you guys.
Anything else?
That's it for me.
Any other discussion?
No.
Entertain the motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.